Morning, everyone, and welcome to the June 2nd meeting of the Citizen Oversight Board. We are still waiting for a couple members to join, but just wanted to welcome everyone here today. Doesn't look like we've got any outside attendees, so let's give it one more minute waiting for our board members to join. I think we'll have a pretty quick meeting today. It's just general business and catching up. And I think we'll be fast at that. Full shirt, Karen. Welcome. It was an awesome game last night. It's just like really decisive. Oh, you're on mute, Karen.
Yeah, it was great.
Hi, Anna. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you all?
Doing good. All right. Well, we've got a quorum now. Let's begin. Hold on, I got to pull up my agenda, which I just lost. First agenda item is just approval of the May 19th meeting minutes. If folks have had a chance to review that and approve it, if I can have a motion.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any opposed? I forgot to take that vote. Nope. Great. Okay. Moving on to our next couple of announcements. So we were going to meet with the 911 director, Andrew Dameron, today, but he had to cancel. That's why we have a very light agenda. And we're working on rescheduling him probably into the fall. We will be canceling our Juneteenth meeting or our June 16th meeting in recognition of Juneteenth and giving the board a little bit of a break from constant meetings. The second thing is that we will have elections on July 7th. So if anyone is interested in the role of chair, vice chair, or nominating yourself for some other elected position, you're welcome to do that. All are encouraged to apply. Moving on, we wanted to spend a little bit of time going through our strategic plan, just to remind everybody what we said we would do and talk about progress along the items that are there. So Daniel, would you mind just sort of pulling that plan up? We can spend a few minutes just sort of talking through our goals, objectives, and activities. All right, if you wouldn't mind making it, yeah, thanks. Okay, let's go down to, yep, goal 1. So 1A was hiring and supervising the new monitor. Yay. I think that's accomplished. Obviously we'll continue in the supervision, and I think we've got a performance plan, and we're pretty dialed in there. So that's really great. Thanks, Liz, for being such a collaborative partner in your onboarding, and we're obviously excited that you're here. Number 1B. Liz, I know you were working on some stuff related to salaries, and I can't remember where that was. We obviously increased the monitor salary, and I can't remember if there were other actions down that we were supposed to take, or if the monitor's office was taking those. Go ahead.
We're addressing it.
Okay.
We're looking into it, and then it's incremental right now, and then once a couple of positions have been reviewed, then we'll come to the COB about the remainder.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. 1C. So we had a few things about making membership more accessible to community members. So the first was shortening the nominating process by removing the nominating committee, which we have accomplished. We also accomplished increasing the stipends for board members, and do our best to mention the opportunity for board membership during meetings. We've also done a little bit to think about, you know, having meetings in community, having meetings in person. So I would say, you know, we're pretty good on this one. I think our continued community engagement will only support this more. So I think from that standpoint, feeling pretty good about this one. Next one. Bylaws. Stefan, do you want to talk to where we are with that?
Yeah, we are in the, we prepared some draft revisions to the bylaws, as well as an annual conflict of interest questionnaire that would be related to the bylaw provisions on that issue, but the bylaws go beyond, you know, conflict of interest issues. You know, we're still working through some issues there, and then I need to follow up with Daniel on some provisions, some edits that I made to the bylaws. He and I worked on some revisions, I don't know, a couple months ago now. I need to follow up with him. And then I think we're in short order, I think we'll be in a position to present both the revisions to the proposed amendments to the bylaws, as well as the proposed annual conflict of interest questionnaire to the board for review and ultimate approval.
Awesome, thanks. We were originally going to talk about the conflict of interest stuff today, but we're going to punt that a couple of weeks. So probably, Stefan, remind me, you think next week sending it out to board members for review and then discussion? Oh, I guess we're canceling our 6/16 meeting. So
We'll certainly get it to the board, you know, at least a week in advance of whenever we discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay, great. Yeah, so let's plan on talking about that at the July 7th meeting, because that's our next meeting. We don't have a meeting on the 30th because that's
okay.
Correct.
All right, and Daniel, I'll be you and I definitely need to be coordinating this month. Then,
Great.
Perfect.
later this month, let's make a plan to coordinate to chat. You know, no later than mid-June, so that we can get rolling.
Cool. And that'll get us pretty close to the Q2, close enough for the Q2 goal. Okay, great. 1E, clarify roles, standard training for board members. Karen and Nick were on point for this. Karen, anything you want to say about this?
Nick and I have not met, but we will, and talk about, you know, suggestions and things that we have thought about in the meantime about for training.
Okay, awesome. We could use maybe the help of our new board member, Tymisha, who might have perspectives on like what it's like to onboard, and certainly Anna and David had the same experience. So maybe there's an opportunity for you all to provide feedback in terms of how did it go, what might you have needed, what might you still need, etc. So, you know, don't hesitate to collaborate with our newer members on that as well. And then maybe we need to think about like what's a new time frame for that item, just to make sure we're not talking about past due into the future. Let's just find a new time that will work for that. So maybe you and Daniel can coordinate on that. Okay, let's keep going.
Just one note on that. There is language in the bylaws, in the drafted bylaws, that touches on the training standpoint. It's not, you know,
Oh,
we
that's
can
right.
figure out the details of the training, but broad strokes are included in the bylaws draft that we reviewed previously.
That's right. That's
Yes,
right.
that is true, and I don't think that those will be controversial at all. But yeah, we should obviously Karen should get in the loop on that for sure. Yeah.
Agree. Yeah, it actually makes it easier for board members, not harder. So I think that should
Yeah,
be
exactly.
tenable. Okay. Community engagement and outreach. So this is, you know, build a plan to do community engagement, prioritize areas that we want to work and geographies. You know, we have that draft plan. I'm not sure we've gotten, you know, tons of objections or even really much feedback from other board members. So I might call that good and ready for us to move forward. I think we've got consensus on, you know, the kinds of events that we want to attend and how we want to, you know, be present at them. So I think we're in good shape here to start moving forward. So good job, Larry. I know he's not on. Okay, next. Plus we can get more photos like this. Yay. Um, Okay. Publish more resources for the public. Daniel is the lead on this. I know, Daniel, you've been making lots of updates to the website. Anything else you want to say about your work here?
Yeah, I just mentioned, I have added more resources to that Oversight in Denver page. Specifically, you'll see some more substantive changes to sort of the historical context tab now on that page that sort of tries to gather some of that institutional knowledge and history of public safety in Denver over roughly the past 20 years. Some of the key stories, key settlements, key changes and milestones that have occurred. I highly recommend folks go take a look at that when they have time. I learned a lot just putting it together. So
Awesome. Thanks for doing that. And to this point, another agenda item we've got is Daniel drafted and I provided edits to I guess it'll just be a press release or a letter that we release about the 20th anniversary of our creation. And I would really like board members to take a look at that. It's a pretty strongly worded letter. And I just want to make sure folks are comfortable with the language that's in there. It talks a lot about, sort of systems of racism and oppression. And I just want to make sure that the board feels like that represents their views. Okay. Next. So we have reached out and tried to coordinate with both candidates. Not surprisingly, it was very hard to find times. So what we will do here is pivot from candidates to, newly electeds and work in that direction. I think for our purposes, it was really not important for us to connect with candidates as much as it is to connect with the people who actually have the job. So I feel okay about that, but we'll definitely have to get heavy on this in the June, July timeframe. So obviously elections are next week. So we'll have clarity on the action items here. Okay, we can go to the next one. Daniel, I know Nick is in trial. Anything you want to say about this?
not a lot.
Okay. Is that just
Yeah.
the drop? That's it?
That's I would say there's not a lot of progress has been made on this goal.
Okay, maybe you and Nick can kind of have a quick chat about this and figure out timeframes that may be more realistic. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. 3D. Drop in on public safety departments was the idea. I know that actually in our discussion of this plan, the OIM and COB had collaborated on something around this years and years ago. And so really, I think the first step here is just sort of picking up what we learned and more conversations about that. So maybe in your conversation, Daniel, with Nick on the timeframe for the other stuff, you guys can kind of figure this out in terms of the work plan here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have the documentation materials that were, resulted from there. I'm not sure how much of that Nick has gotten a chance to review.
Yeah.
Or think deeply about, but I can touch base with him on both of those.
Okay. Independence and transparency of use of force review board. So I think both OIM and COB have had some good influence here. And I think the next step that we have on this item is the OIM was connecting with DPD on some suggested changes, unless I'm remembering that incorrectly, Liz or Greg.
Yes, I believe that's.
Okay. I'm like, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think actually we're waiting on your response to our summary.
Okay, cool. Let's do that then. I think I missed that, so I'll make a note. Thank you for that. Okay. Uh, Okay, and any other board members who'd like to take a look at that, please let me know. Okay, and then enhance the process of governing misconduct and policy complaints. This is the ongoing work of the board for sure. Of sort of latest conversation is the AIU policy and process there. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think this is just kind of an ongoing item, so I think we're good here. Is there a 3E? I think that's it. 3E, yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, Denver Health. Thank you. I was just thinking about this morning. So I think, our recommendations and concerns here have certainly had an escalating effect with DSD, and they have now established this role, which will be the liaison between DSD and Denver Health, and make sure that there's some sort of trackable process for complaints. So I think the next steps here are really to ensure that we get transparency into that trackable process, and once that liaison's on board, building a relationship with that person, and making sure that we've got good processes so that we know complaints are being addressed. And if there are any system issues that are there, that they're being remediated. But I think overall, pretty fast progress on this item, considering, we published this report in March, and we've already had a lot of really productive conversations about it. So that's great. Next, is that it? That's our last one.
That's it.
Okay, great. So I think overall, great job, board, on the work for the strategic plan. We're certainly making headway against the goals that we set for ourselves. And where we feel like we need more time, let's just make sure we right size the plan. The goal is to get this done in the right way. And, we're working on systems change. So we're not necessarily, we have urgency, but we're not in a hurry. And so if you need more time, just get the time that you need on that. Any other comments or thoughts on the strategic plan? Okay, great. Next, okay, I mentioned the Paul Childs commemoration letter, so please review that. Daniel, what do you want to say about the vignette and video scripts?
Yeah, I sent out the scripts, the revised scripts in last Friday's roundup email. And so I don't know if folks have had a chance to take a look at them. They are with a special emphasis, I would say, on sort of the length. We'd sort of envisioned sort of maybe 30 to 45 second clip, like short very more shareable clips. These are all sort of closer to a full minute. So if board members have strong feelings about, really wanting to keep it closer to 30 seconds, more substantive changes will need to be made to those scripts. If you like them the way they are and feel that, we want to move forward with that, we can certainly do that. So they are all currently, in terms of time length, they're all currently within budget. So we're not gaining any additional costs for being a little bit longer than anticipated. If we want to make them longer, it would probably end up costing a little bit more money, but yeah, just wanted to flag that for board members so that we can get those finalized hopefully here very shortly.
That's great, thank you. And as a reminder, we have this sort of longer video, which is intended a little bit around public education about what COB and OIM do, and just helping the community really connect to our mission and purpose. And then the shorter videos, are things that we want to be tweeting out or sharing on Facebook, or connecting to other materials that we send out, and just sort of like vignettes, right? And so just kind of quick information. So if the time looks good to you, great. If you feel like it's still too long, please let us know. But overall, I think they're in really good shape, and I think, they will achieve their purpose, which is helping people understand what it is we do here. So, okay, great. Thank you for that. I think that is all the board business that we had today. Liz, anything you would like to discuss in the public forum?
Quickly, just a couple of things that the OAM has been up to. There is a new banner, billboard banner on Franklin and Colfax that is titled Graduations, Not Funerals. It's a joint collaboration effort between East High School kids, our Denver Teen Empowerment Program, and DPD. The Fox 31 did a little snippet on it the other night. Chief was there. We have one of our kids from the Teen Empowerment Program, so take a look at it, as it is on the south side of Colfax facing east. So we're really excited about that, and this is our, I believe, second banner. We're looking forward to continuing to collaborate, and it was yeah, it's great to see. The other thing in terms of outreach with at least the jail, it's not exactly drop-in, but we are moving forward to having some more communication with the inmates. DSD has reinstated the Inmate Advisory Council. And I sent around, I sent to Daniel what that directive looks like, but essentially it's an inmate council that communicates with DSD staff regarding issues that are coming up at the jail. And they are monthly, and we will be attending those meetings. Myself or someone from my office will be attending those meetings to just kind of be present and listen in. We do have some outreach things coming up, including citywide youth violence prevention youth forum, an all Spanish bridging the gap forum, training on positive youth interactions for DPD. That's June 12th. And we're starting for the first time an autism curriculum development with DPD and the Firefly Autism Organization. So that's coming up here within the next couple of weeks. That's it.
Can you say a little bit more about the inmate council? Like what did that used to be? How is that organized? Oh, sorry, Daniel, I see your hand up. Okay.
It's unrelated, so we can finish this.
It does not address specifically grievances against a particular sheriff or that kind of thing, which is typically handled by OIM. It's more talking about perhaps improvement, conditions, things that can be addressed, not specifically about one particular sheriff or deputy, but conditions. I think it's pretty general. I have not attended one yet. They had been, I believe, canceled during COVID and recently started up again.
Yeah, that was my main question, was sort of, why did it get stopped? But COVID is the reason. Okay, thanks.
It was COVID. Yeah.
All right. Other questions for Monitor Castle?
All these things sound good, Liz. In terms of engagement, raising visibility, profile, all of that.
It's important.
Yep.
Yeah. That's all for me.
Oh, sorry, I was talking, but myself. Daniel?
Sure. Just wanted to circle back on some board activities scheduling. We had previously discussed there was interest in visiting the county jail facility as well as the 911 call center. I have not received availability from all the board members, so if you haven't done that, please do. And also, and I'll send it out, another link in that in an email this afternoon. And then more urgently, well, I guess I should say, we are confirmed for a booth at the Juneteenth Music Festival. And we have tentative schedules for board members to staff it all. Looking forward to it. Coming up next week, there's a deadline for applications to host a booth at the Colorado Black Arts Festival. That is July 7th through 9th. So that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday sort of afternoon, evening, then Saturday, Sunday. And interested, I mean, the deadline is next week. We had talked about potentially doing that. I don't know if, doing Juneteenth and then having a board meeting on the 7th. Not sure what the board's capacity is for another full weekend event, but wanted to highlight that and open that up for discussion.
We have to staff the whole weekend if we go. Can you remind?
I have asked if they have any flexibility. I did not hear back from them. I can try to call them and get someone on the phone to answer that. They have not been explicit about that in the way that, Cinco de Mayo was very, very explicit up front about, we expect everyone to staff the whole time. I anticipate that there will be some flexibility.
Okay. I'm available that weekend if anyone else is. So maybe Daniel, just see if we can be there for a bit of time.
I'm available. Well,
I'm out of town that weekend, sorry.
Okay. All right, yeah, let's get a little bit more information, and I think it would be a good place, to be.
Great.
Okay, what else?
That's all I've got.
All right.
Hey, Julia and Daniel, can I ask for, just so this can all be in one place, because Daniel, you said you're going to follow up with an email, because I know you have sent these things out in perhaps in different emails. So Julia mentioned she wanted the board to be comfortable with maybe a statement that's going to go on our website. Or perhaps could you provide a link to that? And then also the Paul Child's letter.
That's the same.
Oh, it's the same thing. Okay,
Mhm.
my bad. Okay, and then the link to the video scripts would be good. And then lastly, the whatever link to put our availability to visit the county jail and the 911 center. Maybe put that all in one email, and then we can all kind of respond to all of those issues that you're looking for feedback from us on. Does that work?
Perfect.
Yeah, I can even split. I can send two emails, one sort of a to-do list email, and then another one that's more informational, typical sort of Friday roundup stuff.
Okay, that'd be good.
If that would.
I just want to have all the to-do stuff in one place, then I'll
Sure.
go through it this weekend and then respond to all that. Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Daniel, also, I see Tymisha in the attendees, unfortunately. But I think this is all that we have for this session. So let's bring her over and let her know we're going to transition to executive session. Monitor Castle, I believe you've got some things, open investigations to discuss during exec session.
Yes, I have a couple of things.
Okay, great. So if you can promote Tymisha, then we'll tell her we're getting off, and we'll join the next meeting. Hi, Tymisha.
Hello, how are you?
Sorry, I just realized that you were in the attendees. We are going to transition to exec session. So if you wouldn't mind meeting us there, we will. Oh, I need a motion to adjourn to exec session. Sorry.
I'll move.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Well, this concludes the public meeting for COB 6.2. We'll see you over in exec session. Thanks so much.